"Is this a joke, or did someone forget to lock up the antiques?" The whisper travelled through the line of young Marines like a ripple across still water. 23 pairs of eyes fixed on the rifle in the old man's hands. Mohawk brown polymer, exposed iron sights, a tubular magazine jutting from the buttstock like something pulled from their grandfather's closet. Sergeant First Class Marcus Webb stood before them, 71 years old, white hair cropped military short, hands steady as bedrock. He laid the rifle across the demonstration table without ceremony. "Today," he said, his voice low and unhurried, "you're going to learn something your fancy optics can never teach you." One Marine elbowed another. A stifled laugh escaped. Webb's pale blue eyes drifted across the line, pausing on each face just long enough to make them uncomfortable. He said nothing. The silence stretched. If this story reminds you that true skill never becomes obsolete, type Fundamentals in the comments below. Camp Pendleton's Advanced Marksmanship. Training Center received only the top performers from each battalion. These were not boot camp recruits fumbling through their first qualifications. These were Marines who had earned expert badges, who had logged hundreds of hours on simulators, who could recite the specifications of their M27 infantry automatic rifles in their sleep. They had arrived that morning expecting to train with the latest optics, perhaps some next-generation targeting systems. Instead, they found Marcus Webb. The training center's director had warned them only that their instructor for the week was unconventional. He had served in Vietnam, they were told. He had trained special operations forces across 3 decades. He had forgotten more about marksmanship than most men ever learned, but none of that registered with the young Marine staring at the plastic rifle on the table. What registered was that this old man looked like he belonged in a veteran's home, and his equipment looked like it belonged in a museum. The rifle Webb had placed before them was a Remington Nylon 66, manufactured in 1962. Its stock was not wood but structural nylon polymer, a revolutionary material developed by DuPont called Zytel 101. In 1959, when Remington first introduced this rifle, critics dismissed it as a toy. The shooting world scoffed at the idea of a plastic gun. Who would trust their life to synthetic materials when steel and walnut had served marksmen for centuries? Yet Remington had done something the skeptics failed to understand. They had created a rifle that weighed only 4 pounds, a rifle that required no lubrication because its bolt rode on self-lubricating nylon rails, a rifle that could be submerged in salt water, dragged through sand, frozen in Arctic temperatures, and still fire without malfunction. Before its release, Remington had tested the Nylon 66 by driving a station wagon over it, front and rear tyres, then fishing it from the bottom of a lake, and it still fired 100 rounds without a single jam. The tester's report read simply, "Looks like a plastic toy. Performance and accuracy unbelievable." Webb lifted the rifle from the table. "This weapon," he said, "has iron sights, no red dots, no magnification, no ballistic computers telling you where to point." He turned the rifle slowly so they could see its full profile. The polymer stock had aged to a warm patina, scratched and worn in places but structurally perfect. The Marine Corps taught marksmanship with iron sights for over 2 centuries. Your great-grandfathers hit targets at 500 yards with rifles far more primitive than this. They did it because they understood something that optics and technology have made you forget. He paused, letting the words settle. They understood that the rifle is not the marksman. The rifle is just a tool. The marksman is made of flesh and bone and discipline discipline, gentlemen, is what we will find today. Or not. Lance Corporal Tyler Morrison was the first to step forward when Webb called for a volunteer. Morrison was 22, built like a swimmer, with 3 expert qualification badges on his service record. He had placed second in his battalion's marksmanship competition 2 months prior. He was confident, perhaps too confident, and he wanted to show this old man that modern Marines could handle anything. Webb handed him the Nylon 66 and gestured toward the 25-meter target. 5 rounds, Webb said. Take your time. Morrison shouldered the rifle. It felt absurdly light in his hands, barely more than a broomstick. He found the front sight post, aligned it with the rear aperture, and settled his breathing the way he had been taught. The first shot cracked across the range. Miss Morrison frowned. He adjusted his stance, focused harder on the front sight. Second shot, miss. Third shot, wide left. Fourth shot, high. Fifth shot. Finally a hit, but barely. The round clipped the outer edge of the target, a shot that would have earned him a grimace from any instructor. Morrison lowered the rifle, his face flushing red. "Something's wrong with the sights," he said. Webb's expression did not change. Next, one by one, the Marines stepped forward. The Marines. One by one, they failed. These were not incompetent shooters. These were experts by any modern military standard. Yet the Nylon 66 exposed something none of them wanted to admit. Their marksmanship had become dependent on technology. They had learned to trust the red dot hovering in their optic rather than their own eyes. They had learned to let the rifle tell them when they were aligned rather than feeling it in their bones. Without those crutches, they were lost. The little polymer rifle, weighing barely 4 pounds, amplified every flaw in their technique. It punished every slight tremor in their grip. It revealed every unconscious flinch before the trigger broke. By the time the last Marine had stepped back into line, the mood had shifted from amusement to something closer to humiliation. Webb collected the rifle without comment. He walked to the firing line, his movements economical and unhurried, the motions of a man who had performed these actions 10,000 times. He did not assume a tactical stance. He did not crouch or brace dramatically. He simply stood, the rifle rising to his shoulder as naturally as breathing. The first shot was a clean center hit. The target 25 meters downrange showed a neat hole dead in the black. Webb cycled the action, smooth and deliberate. Second shot, center, third shot, center, fourth shot, center, fifth shot, center. 5 rounds, 5 perfect hits, grouped so tightly they could have been covered by a silver dollar. Webb lowered the rifle and turned to face the line of silent Marines. No one whispered now. No one smirked. The Nylon 66, Webb said, was never a toy. In 1959, a Remington exhibition shooter named Tom Frye used this exact model to break the world record for aerial target shooting. He fired at 100,000 wooden blocks thrown into the air over 13 consecutive days, 8 hours a day, one shot every 3.6 seconds. He missed only 6. The rifles were cleaned just 5 times during the entire marathon. Not a single malfunction, not one. Webb set the rifle down gently, almost reverently. Tom Frye succeeded because he understood the 4 fundamentals of marksmanship: steady position, proper aim, breath control, trigger squeeze. These principles are older than this rifle. They are older than the Marine Corps itself, and they work whether you are firing a flintlock musket or a satellite-guided smart weapon. But here is what technology has stolen from you. He pointed at the rifle. Weight. This rifle weighs 4 pounds. Your M27 weighs nearly 8.5 pounds loaded. When you shoulder a heavy rifle with a mounted optic, it stabilizes itself. Your tremors disappear into the mass. Your mistakes get absorbed by the weight. But when you pick up something this light, there is nowhere for your errors to hide. Every muscle twitch translates directly to the muzzle. Every anticipation of recoil pulls your shot. Every heartbeat makes the front sight dance. The Marines listened in silence as Webb continued. Steady position means your body must become a platform, not a collection of straining muscles. You do not force the rifle onto the target. You build a position where the rifle naturally points where you need it. When you close your eyes, settle into your stance and then open them again. The sights should already be aligned. If they are not, you are fighting yourself, and a marksman who fights himself has already lost. He picked up the Nylon 66 again, demonstrating as he spoke. Proper aim is not about seeing the target clearly. It is about seeing the front sight clearly. Your target should be blurred. Your rear sight should be blurred. The only thing in sharp focus should be that front sight post. Your eye cannot focus on 3 things at once. The target will always be where you expect it. The front sight is what tells you where your bullet will actually go. Most of you were looking past the front sight, staring at the target, hoping the shot would find its way. Hope is not a marksmanship principle. Webb's voice dropped lower, more intense. Breath control is not about holding your breath until you turn purple. It is about timing your shot to the natural pause between exhale and inhale, that still moment when your body's most stable. You have approximately 4 to 6 seconds in that pause before your muscles begin to tremble from oxygen deprivation. If you cannot break the shot in that window, you lower the rifle. Breathe normally and start again. Rushing the shot is how you develop a flinch, and once you have a flinch, it will haunt you for years. He shouldered the rifle one more time, his finger resting alongside the trigger guard. Trigger squeeze. This is where most of you failed today. You jerked the trigger. You anticipated the recoil and pushed the muzzle down before the round even left the barrel. You did this because you have trained with optics that compensate for your errors, and you have forgotten how to let the shot surprise you. The correct trigger squeeze is slow, steady pressure straight to the rear. You should not know exactly when the rifle will fire. If you know, you will flinch. The shot should break like a glass rod snapping, unexpected, clean, final. One of the Marines, a corporal with a deployment patch on his shoulder, raised his hand. "Sergeant, why does any of this matter if we'll always have optics in combat?" Webb nodded slowly, as if he had been waiting for this question. In 1968, I was running night patrols in the Central Highlands. My squad walked into an ambush. In the first 5 seconds, I took shrapnel that destroyed my rifle's front sight. No backup iron sights, no optics to switch to, just a bent piece of metal where my sight post used to be. He let that image hang in the air. I killed 3 enemy fighters that night using a technique called instinctive shooting, point-shoulder method, aligning the rifle with my body mechanics rather than any sight at all. I could do that because I had spent years training with iron sights until the fundamentals lived in my muscle memory. I knew where my rounds would go because I understood my body, not because I trusted a piece of glass. Webb walked along the line, making eye contact with each Marine. Technology fails, batteries die, optics crack. You will find yourself, someday, in a situation where the only thing between you and death is your ability to place rounds on target without any electronic assistance. When that moment comes, will you have the fundamentals, or will you have nothing but expensive equipment you cannot use? He stopped at the end of the line. This week you will shoot this rifle. You will shoot it until you can group 5 rounds inside a 2-inch circle at 25 meters. You will shoot it until your body remembers what your mind has forgotten. And when we are finished, you will understand why the Marine Corps still teaches iron sights, even in an age of lasers and computers. Because the fundamentals never become obsolete. Only the shooters who neglect them do. The training that followed was unlike anything the Marines had experienced. Webb broke down their stances, their grip pressure, their cheek welds, their breathing patterns. He showed them how to read their shot groups like a diagnostic tool. Shots low and left meant they were jerking the trigger. Shots high meant they were anticipating recoil and lifting their heads. He made them dry fire thousands of times, watching a dime balanced on the front sight, punishing any trigger pull that caused the coin to fall. He taught them to feel the trigger's slack, the wall, and the break as 3 distinct phases. He made them shoot with their eyes closed, calling their shots before looking, forcing them to develop an internal awareness of where the muzzle was pointed based on body position alone. By the 3rd day, the improvements were undeniable. Marines who had scattered rounds across the target were now grouping consistently. Their confidence grew, but it was a different kind of confidence. Not the swagger of youth, but the quiet certainty that comes from mastering something difficult. They began to understand what Webb had meant about the rifle being just a tool. The Nylon 66 had not changed. Its sights were the same. Its 4-pound weight was the same. What had changed was them. Lance Corporal Morrison approached Webb during a break on the 4th day. "Sergeant," he said, "I owe you an apology. When you pulled that rifle out, I thought—" He trailed off, embarrassed. Webb's weathered face softened slightly. "You thought I was a relic showing off antiques?" Morrison nodded. "I was wrong. This is the hardest I've ever had to work to hit a target, and it's making me better." Webb reached into his pocket and pulled out a small laminated card, worn at the edges. He handed it to Morrison. It was a photograph, faded with age, showing a younger Webb standing beside a sign that read, USMC Scout Sniper School, Quantico, 1971. In the photograph, Webb held a rifle across his chest. Morrison recognized it immediately. The same Mohawk brown stock, the same iron sights. The Nylon 66. "I was a scout sniper instructor for 11 years, Webb said. We used all kinds of rifles, match-grade bolt actions, custom builds worth more than a private's annual salary. But I always started my students on this." He took the photograph back, tucking it into his pocket. "Because this rifle teaches you everything you need to know. It teaches you that fundamentals matter more than equipment. It teaches you that marksmanship is about the shooter, not the gun. And it teaches you humility, because no matter how good you think you are, a 4-pound plastic rifle from 1962 can humble you in about 5 seconds." On the final day of training, Webb organized a qualification shoot. The Marines would fire the Nylon 66 at targets from 25 to 100 meters, using only iron sights, timed and scored to Marine Corps standards. Every single shooter passed. More than half earned expert level scores. When the last Marine finished the course, they gathered around Webb at the demonstration table. The old sergeant stood silently for a moment, running his fingers along the polymer stock of the Nylon 66. Remington made over 1 million of these rifles, he said. They sold them for $49.95. Critics said they were toys, collectors said they were novelties. But for 30 years, this rifle proved that reliability, accuracy, and solid engineering matter more than prestige or price. It worked in the Arctic. It worked in the jungle. It worked on the deserts and the lakes and the mountains. It worked because the men who designed it understood that a weapon's job is to put rounds on target, not to impress anyone. He lifted the rifle one final time, turning it in the light so they could all see. You came here thinking you were expert marksmen. You left knowing that expertise is not a badge you earn once. It is a discipline you maintain forever. The fundamentals do not care about your rank. They do not care about your equipment. They do not care about your ego. They only care about whether you do the work. Webb set the rifle down and straightened, his posture as parade ground perfect as it had been 50 years ago. Now go back to your units. Pick up your M27s with their fancy optics and your $1,000 red dots. But remember what you learned this week. Remember that somewhere in your battalion's arms room, there should be a training rifle with iron sights, and you should use it, because the day your electronics fail is not the day you want to start learning how to shoot. The Marines filed out, different men than they had been 5 days before. Several stopped to shake Webb's hand. A few took photographs of the Nylon 66, asking about its history, about Tom Frye, about Webb's years as an instructor. Morrison was the last to leave. He paused at the door, looking back at the old sergeant still standing at the table, the rifle resting across his forearms like a sacred object. "Sergeant Webb," he said, "that rifle, you've had it since 71? Webb nodded. 54 years. My father bought it new in 1962 for my 16th birthday. I brought it to Paris Island. I brought it to Vietnam. I brought it to Quantico. I have fired more rounds through this rifle than I could possibly count. Tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. The only parts I have ever replaced are the recoil spring and the front sight blade." Morrison shook his head in disbelief. "And it still shoots that well." Webb allowed himself a small smile, the first Morrison had seen all week. "Son, a good rifle, properly maintained, properly respected, will outlast every trend, every gadget, every new piece of technology the defense industry invents to separate the government from its money. This rifle was designed to be indestructible. It has proven that promise every single day for 6 decades. Morrison saluted, a gesture that felt instinctive rather than required. "Thank you, Sergeant, for everything." Webb returned the salute, crisp and precise. "Go be dangerous, Marine, and never forget, the fundamentals are what make you deadly. Everything else is just accessories." The training center fell quiet as the last vehicle pulled away. Webb remained at the table, carefully wiping down the Nylon 66, checking its action, preparing it for storage. Outside the window, the California sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of rifle fire echoed from another range. Young Marines learning their craft, just as he had learned it half a century before. The rifle in his hands had seen more conflict, more training, more students than he could remember. But its lessons remained the same: steady position, proper aim, breath control, trigger squeeze, 4 principles, timeless, eternal. And as true today as they had been when the first marksman raised the first rifle and sent the first round down range. The Remington Nylon 66 went back into its case, nestled in foam that had moulded perfectly to its shape over the decades. Webb latched the case closed and carried it to his truck. Next month there would be another class, another group of confident young shooters who had never known marksmanship without electronics, another opportunity to teach them what their optics could never reveal, that the most important weapon in any engagement is not strapped to your chest. It is housed between your ears, and it is forged through discipline, practice, and an unwavering commitment to the fundamentals that never, ever become obsolete. If you believe that mastery comes from discipline, not gadgets, subscribe to this channel for more stories that prove the old ways still have power.